All right, good morning. Plainfield Central AP Psychology. Um, want to say it's good to see you, but obviously that doesn't work out quite well. I'm glad that I have this opportunity to at least be able to contact you guys. Got to tell you, things are weird right now. There's no doubt about it. And I know I talked with each of you guys on Monday just about how weird things are and kind of where we're at, but you know full well I'm going to do whatever I need to do or whatever I can do to try and make sure you are prepared and ready. And so that's why we're doing these recordings. That's why we're doing what we need to do to get you guys squared away. So obviously I want to kind of try and create this to be as normal class as possible, so you guys have that experience of as normal a class as possible. Obviously you guys are at home doing your thing, and feel free, pause, play, come back to, we'll do whatever you need to do with this video. But the hope is that you guys have the opportunity to kind of work with me, stay together on kind of some more material, and do what we need to do. I'll tell you that for sure there's going to be some issues and just things that I need to figure out of this screen record process. Part of it is making sure you guys can hear everything that I'm saying to you, and getting all the material and all the information that you need to get from the video recording. So if there's something that you're missing, make sure you let me know by shooting me an email or whatever it might be. Please do that. So we'll go ahead and get started. You can see on the screen right now is our normal daily agenda. Again, looking to try and keep things as normal as possible for you guys. So there's a couple of things that I do want to touch base on. And the first thing is obviously just on the bell work. I tell you, I've been missing March Madness a little bit. Creating brackets and kind of watching basketball and all that is a lot of fun. And so what I ended up doing is, for you guys, I created a bracket challenge. The bracket challenge is really for review for that AP test, which is obviously all encompassing. But what you're going to have the opportunity to do, and as I flip around a little bit, you're going to have the opportunity to go to a website and actually create a bracket for yourself. Like you can see here. And the thing is, the contestants or competitors in this March Madness is not basketball teams. Instead, they are psychologists. And so what I've done for you is I've created a series of different matchups between some of the most influential psychologists in history. And what I've done is I've created a bracket for you to be able to fill out. The thing is, this is not fun unless there's actual competition here. And so what will happen is there'll be rounds of voting that will happen once you have created your bracket. Now, to get you to the full understanding of what's going to happen, what you'll do, and I've already got this posted to Schoology, what you'll do is you'll go to challenge.com/PHS2020. You'll notice if you scroll down, you can see the bracket that I've already made a copy of for you. You'll just go here, create a prediction. You'll go ahead and click create and decide who's going to win out of each of these matchups of some incredibly important psychologists, most of whom you know, some of them you don't. We'll get to the idea of how you're going to be able to figure out who those people are here just in a second. But the idea is that you have the opportunity to decide who's going to win out of all of these, and then we'll go through rounds of voting and actually decide who the most influential psychologist is in history. Again, this is a thinly veiled attempt just to get you to review the most influential psychologists. It's a good opportunity, especially since the thing that I have posted for you includes the March Madness seeds, which really is just a quick synopsis of each of these psychologists and what they've given to us, psychologically speaking. Again, most of these you know. Some of them, like Rosenhan and the Rosenhan study, those are things that we're going to talk about in our next chapter. Bandura, obviously, you know full well who Albert Bandura was. And so the idea is that you have the opportunity to read through, get an idea of who you would vote for, and then actually create a bracket. Decide who is going to win in a matchup between Stanley Milgram and John B. Watson. It's a pretty tough one right at the top. So who would win? That person would go right here. Who wins between Leon Festinger and John Darley? That winner would go right here, and then onward until we have our champion. So again, the goal is to have a little bit of fun. All this material, so you can locate it, is on Schoology. So if you go to, our Schoology page, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see I have a March Madness folder for you. Okay, the March Madness folder does have the March Madness bracket for you if you really wanted to see it. As well as the seeds, that document that I just showed to you. Okay. Now, speaking about Schoology, Schoology does house all of our material as well for the e-learning process. You can find the folder right here. This is where I'll be posting this as well, but it is in e-learning 2020. I have some things in here that I'm going to revert back to and talk about as we're going through today's lesson and future lessons. So with that said, let's tackle this lesson. So going back to the daily agenda, you can see today we're starting our look at personality. Now, what I will really ask you to do, and what I normally do in class, is I would actually have you take a personality test. Clearly, the subject of personality testing in psychology is one that is rife with a lot of very interesting things, but a lot of issues as well. But trying to answer the question of who you are you an individual that is introverted versus a person who's extroverted? Are you a person who is more open to new experiences versus a person who's closed off? And then, of course, how much of those traits are you? That's really in large part what we're trying to test here and figure out. That's what psychologists for generations have been trying to do. And so what better way to actually start this off than to actually take a version of a test? And so you're going to take the OCEAN test. You don't know what the OCEAN acronym stands for yet, but you will. And so all you have to do is just go up here, and I'm going to ask you to take the introductory personality test, this one right here, a little bit of a page that looks exactly like this. It's a Big 5 project. I may even rename, just so you guys know, I may even rename the OCEAN test one for something for later, because that's going to be different. So what I ask you to do right now is pause the video, click on this link right here, and go see what your personality is, at least from a computer program trying to track it. So go ahead and do that now. And this is weird, but I guess I can just keep going. So I will just keep going. Next topic within the material then is we need to start up at the actual psychological look at personality and personality theory. And so section number 1 is going to come to us from the psychodynamic theory. Remember, psychodynamic theory is the concept that any component of us is going to come from, in large part, unconscious conflicts. And so this is finally where we're going to start talking about good old Sigmund Freud. We've been alluding to him all year. Now it's finally time for us to take a look at his theory. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, I do need to start this. I'm going to have to manipulate a little bit, so bear with me here. Let's make this bigger, maybe. Okay, I'll have to move around this lens, if you will, as we go through, but we'll do that as we need. So, psychodynamic theory and personality. When we start talking about psychodynamic theory and personality, we need to talk about these theorists are the major ones. So when we talk about psychodynamic theory in personality, we need to obviously, once again, know and understand Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud is the biggest. He is the man, the myth, the legend within the concepts. Carl Jung is another one. It's not Jung, it is Jung. Karen Horney and Alfred Adler round out all the individuals that we're going to be talking about within psychodynamic theory and personality. So, continue on then. Let's talk about Sigmund Freud, the basics. Sigmund Freud held the belief, as he was doing his work within the manipulate this a little bit more. As he was doing his work in the late 1800s, early 1900s, he had been doing his kind of research on dreams, especially early on, and he tried to have the understanding of kind of where our behavioral concepts come from. Where are they driven from? And so what he believed, especially within the concept of personality, he believed our personality traits are actually going to be dictated by repressed conflicts and desires within our unconscious mind. He believed that there's that hidden well, hidden reservoir within all of us that kind of holds all the things we aren't all that happy about ourselves, envy and greed and disgust. He believed that we kind of shove those things down deep into this unconscious. And so he actually made a very interesting analogy, and he made the statement that our unconscious mind, or our mind overall, is actually very similar to an iceberg, where an iceberg, of course, holds the vast majority of its mass underneath the surface, with only a small component being above the surface. Sigmund Freud argued that the same is our mind, whereas the components of our mind that we are conscious of and we are able to logically think and rationalize, that's only the stuff that we are able to come in contact with. That's the stuff above the surface. Conversely, he believed the majority of us, just as humans and within our minds themselves, lies beneath our level of consciousness or layer of consciousness. And so that is the unconscious, according to Sigmund Freud. So what Sigmund Freud did, which was a little bit groundbreaking, is he ended up structuring our unconscious and our mind completely into these different sections. And so he believed that there are three components of our mind. There is the id, the ego, and the superego. Each of these three things are going to be drivers of who we are and what we are, and they're going to do different things. So to talk about them, we first have the id. Now I want you to think of the id as this structure and this almost part of you that is going to be very animalistic, very guttural. It's one of the reasons why it's called the id, to be that guttural thing. And what he believed is that each of our components of our mind actually hold kind of these drives. And what he believed that the id is driven by is, number one, eros. Eros is the idea of our life instincts. Life instincts are going to in large part be kind of the sexuality within humans. So eros being a short form of erotic. And so he did believe that the libido as an energy source, especially sexual energy source, comes from this id concept. He also believed in Thanatos. Obviously, many of you are going to refer back to Marvel's Thanos. This is the death instinct. So yes, some comic book writer had utilized that concept for themselves. But Thanatos are the death instincts. And so according to Sigmund Freud, the id is this structure that is responsible for aggression and destructiveness. A lot of times that comes out, you look at a child who's throwing a tantrum, they want to throw and break. To Sigmund Freud, he would look at that child and their behaviors as the id just being unrestrained. As we age, according to Sigmund Freud, there are parts of our mind that we're going to talk about in a second that kind of control the id. Because obviously if we were constantly driven by erotic feelings and aggressive feelings and impulses, it would be a very different world. Now, he also believed that the id is actually driven by the pleasure principle. The pleasure principle specifically looks for that immediate satisfaction of both of these kinds of instincts. He believed that our id wants to have eros be stimulated and Thanatos be stimulated all the time, constantly. The thing is, the id is unconscious. And so while it's unconscious, the id does try and seek expression through dreams, number one. The id, according to Sigmund Freud, is constantly getting into our dreams and kind of showing itself and rearing its head, if you will. And then also through what Sigmund Freud called parapraxis. As we've kind of gone through history, we've started to call these Freudian slips. This is where an individual is in the midst of a conversation, they are talking, and all of a sudden they say something that they didn't really mean to, sometimes in a sexual nature, but that's where they kind of slip and they don't mean to say what they say, but Sigmund Freud would have looked at that situation and said that was simply a component of the unconscious mind driving through and trying to seek expression. So, quick heads up, I'm looking at this video recording right now. We're at the 13-minute mark. I only have 15 minutes using this system, 15 minutes per video. So just so you guys know, I will be stopping in a second. I'll look at the next slide in the PowerPoint. I will be stopping in a second and starting up part 2 of the intro to personality. Okay, so according to Sigmund Freud, there's also what is called the ego. Now, the ego is the conscious component of yourself, the conscious component of your mind that actually develops from your id as you age. According to Sigmund Freud, so Clara right now is in the next room. She cries, she screams, she yells. Obviously no sexuality within her, but she cries and screams and yells, and that's the id, according to Sigmund Freud, being unrestrained. As she ages, and as we all age, according to Freud, our ego develops. And our ego develops because of teaching from our parents, from teachers, and society in large part that tells us what we should do to restrain our id, what is okay that our id does and what is not okay at all. According to Freud, the ego does operate on what is called the reality principle. The reality principle is where your ego, that part of your mind, tries to make compromises between the demands of the id to be destructive and to be lustful and to do all these things and what the real world requires in terms of rules and laws. So your ego is kind of like the mediator almost, especially for the third part of your brain, the third part of your mind, which is the superego, which we'll talk about here in a second. I will pause this section and start up a new video here shortly.